The dust cloud rising behind the wagon told Rebecca Hartfield she had maybe 10 minutes before the entire town of Deadwood, South Dakota knew she had arrived, and she intended to prove herself capable long before any man could swagger over with unsolicited assistance. It was June 1876, and the mining town sprawled before her like a promise of new beginnings, rough wooden buildings climbing the gulch walls while men shouted and hammered and fought their way toward fortunes that would elude most of them. Rebecca set the brake on her wagon with determined precision, her calico dress already coated with trail dust from the 3-week journey from Cheyenne, and climbed down without waiting for her legs to stop trembling from the constant vibration of wooden wheels over rocky ground. She had sold everything she owned after her father's death to buy this wagon, these supplies, and the deed to a small shop space on Main Street, where she would prove that a woman of 23 could run a successful dressmaking business without a husband's name or a father's protection. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Rebecca surveyed her cargo with calculating eyes. Bolts of fabric wrapped in canvas to protect them from the elements, her sewing machine packed carefully in a wooden crate. Boxes of thread and needles and buttons, her personal belongings, her father's books, and the heavy trunk containing her mother's china that she had refused to sell despite knowing its impracticality. She had loaded most of it herself back in Cheyenne with the help of the merchant who had sold her the supplies, but she had been fresh then, energized by the prospect of independence. Now, bone-weary and covered in grime, she faced the task of unloading it all into the shop she had never seen except in the optimistic description from the land agent's letter. "Ma'am, you look like you could use a hand with that." The voice came from her left, and Rebecca turned to see a man in his mid-20s leaning against the hitching post outside the general store. He wore the practical clothes of someone who worked with his hands, denim trousers and a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms bronzed by the sun and corded with lean muscle. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see the hint of a smile playing at his lips, the kind of expression men wore when they assumed women needed rescuing. "I appreciate the offer, but I managed to load it, and I will manage to unload it," Rebecca said, her voice carrying the clipped politeness of someone who had refused such offers approximately 24 times during her journey west. She turned back to her wagon and reached for the nearest box containing spools of thread organized by color, a system she had spent an entire evening perfecting before she left Cheyenne. "Suit yourself." The man did not move from his position, and Rebecca felt his eyes on her as she hefted the box and carried it toward the building the land agent had indicated in his letter. The door stood slightly ajar, and she could smell the mustiness of a space that had been closed up for months. She pushed it open with her shoulder and stepped inside, letting her eyes adjust to the dimness. The room was smaller than she had hoped, but larger than she had feared, with good light from the front windows and a back room that would serve as her living quarters until she could afford something better. Rough wooden floors, walls that needed whitewashing, and a pervasive smell of tobacco and old leather that suggested the previous occupant had been a saddle maker or cobbler. She set the box down and returned to the wagon, acutely aware that several townspeople had stopped to watch her. A woman unloading a wagon alone was apparently entertainment in Deadwood, or perhaps they were simply curious about the newcomer. Rebecca lifted her chin and reached for the next box, this one heavier, containing her sewing shears and measuring tools and the small strong box with what remained of her money. Her arms protested, but she had not come all this way to appear weak in front of strangers who would judge her capability to run a business based on whether she needed help carrying boxes. The man was still there when she returned for the third load, though he had shifted position and was now examining one of her horses with the casual expertise of someone who knew good horse flesh when he saw it. "You have got a good team here," he said, running his hand along the mare's neck. "They look tired, though. There's a livery stable 2 blocks down that will treat them right if you need boarding." "Thank you for the information," Rebecca said, softening slightly because he was at least offering useful advice rather than assumptions about her weakness. She grabbed another box and felt her muscles protest. The truth was she had not eaten since breakfast, and that had been hardtack and jerky consumed while the wagon rolled on because she had been eager to reach Deadwood before nightfall. Her arms trembled slightly as she carried the box inside, and she had to stop halfway to adjust her grip. When she came back out, the man had moved away from her horses and was standing at a respectful distance, his hands in his pockets. "Name is Cole Briggs," he said. "I run a carpentry business here, building mostly, some furniture when people want it. That shop you are moving into, I replaced the floor joists last year for the previous owner. They are solid now." Rebecca paused despite herself. "Rebecca Hartfield, I am opening a dressmaking shop." She waited for the inevitable comment about the foolishness of that endeavor in a mining town full of men, but Cole simply nodded. "That will be welcome. The women here have been making do with catalog orders or sewing their own, and most are too busy with other work to do a good job of it. My sister will be pleased to have options." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that seemed more respectful than flirtatious, and walked away, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust as he headed toward a large building that looked like it might be under construction. Rebecca watched him go for a moment longer than necessary, then shook herself mentally and returned to work. She had not come west to get distracted by men, even polite ones with useful information about floor joists. She had come to build a life on her own terms. The afternoon wore on, and Rebecca fell into a rhythm. Lift, carry, set down, return. Her shoulders began to ache in earnest, and her hands developed red marks where the rough wood of the crates pressed into her palms. She ignored the discomfort and kept working, driven by a stubbornness that had been her defining characteristic since childhood. Her father used to say she would argue with a fence post if she thought it was in the wrong position, and he had not been far off. That stubbornness had kept her going after her mother died of consumption when Rebecca was 15, had kept her sewing late into the night to help with household expenses, had given her the courage to refuse 3 separate marriage proposals from men who wanted a housekeeper more than a partner. The sun was beginning to slant toward the western hills when she reached the final items in her wagon. The bolts of fabric came next, and she carried them carefully, thinking about the months of savings each one represented. Calico and muslin for everyday dresses, fine wool for winter garments, cotton for undergarments, and 2 bolts of silk. That had been an extravagance she hoped to justify by making wedding dresses for the women brave or optimistic enough to get married in a place like Deadwood. She arranged them on the shelves the previous owner had left behind, already envisioning how she would organize the space. Her sewing machine came next, and she recruited 2 boys playing in the street to help her carry it inside in exchange for a nickel each. They handled it with exaggerated care after she explained how much it cost, and she tipped them an extra penny for their gentleness. The machine had been her father's gift to her on her 20th birthday, purchased with money he could barely afford after a good harvest, and she treasured it more than anything else she owned. As evening approached and the shadows lengthened across the street, Rebecca faced the last item in her wagon. Her mother's trunk sat at the very back, wedged against the tailgate where she had positioned it to keep it stable during the journey. It was made of heavy oak and reinforced with iron bands, built by her grandfather to last generations, and it was filled with carefully packed china wrapped in layers of cloth and paper. She had known when she loaded it that unloading would be a challenge, but she had been unwilling to leave it behind. Now, staring at the trunk in the fading light, Rebecca admitted to herself what she had been avoiding all afternoon. She was exhausted. Her arms felt like they were made of lead, her back ached, and her hands were raw. The trunk had taken 3 men to load into the wagon, and while she had helped, she had not supported its full weight. She walked around to the back of the wagon and tried to shift it, testing its weight. It barely moved. Rebecca bit her lip and looked around. The street had emptied somewhat as people headed home for supper, but she could see lights beginning to glow in windows and hear the sound of a piano starting up in one of the saloons. She could ask for help. There was no shame in admitting that some objects required more than one person to move safely. But the thought of ending her first day in Deadwood by confirming everyone's suspicions that she needed assistance made her jaw clench with frustration. She tried again, bracing her feet against the wheel and pushing with all her remaining strength. The trunk shifted perhaps an inch, then settled back into place. Rebecca let out a breath of frustration and wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. leaving a smudge of dirt across her skin. That one looks like it might benefit from an extra set of hands. Cole's voice came from behind her, and Rebecca jumped slightly. She had not heard him approach, and when she turned, she found him standing a respectful distance away, his expression neutral. He had clearly been working, as he was dustier than before and carrying a leather tool bag that looked well used. Rebecca opened her mouth to refuse, but the words would not come. She was so tired she could barely stand, and the trunk genuinely could not be moved safely by one person. Pride was one thing, but destroying her mother's china or injuring herself badly enough that she could not work was another. She swallowed her automatic refusal and met his eyes directly. "I would appreciate the help with this one," she said, her voice steady despite the admission costing her. Something shifted in Cole's expression, a softening around his eyes that suggested approval rather than triumph. "Where do you want it?" "The back room, against the far wall if possible." Rebecca stepped aside to give him access to the wagon, and he climbed up with easy grace, his movements economical and efficient. He examined the trunk for a moment, finding the best angle to lift it, then looked back at her. "If you can guide from the front while I take the weight from the back, we should be able to get it down without dropping it. What is inside, if you do not mind my asking?" "My mother's china. It is probably foolish to have brought it, but I could not leave it behind." Rebecca heard the defensive note in her own voice and hated it. "Not foolish. The things that connect us to family matter, especially out here." Cole positioned himself and nodded to her. "Ready when you are." They worked together in careful coordination, Rebecca guiding the heavy trunk as Cole took most of its weight. She could see the muscles in his arms strain as he lowered it from the wagon, and she steadied it from her position, making sure it did not tilt or swing. When it reached the ground safely, they both paused to catch their breath. "That is solid oak," Cole said, sounding impressed rather than complaining. "Your grandfather knew how to build." "How did you know my grandfather built it?" "The joinery. That is old-world craftsmanship, the kind that takes years to learn. My father was a carpenter before me, and he taught me to recognize quality work." Cole bent to lift his end again. "Ready for the next part?" Together they maneuvered the trunk through the door of her shop and into the back room, where a narrow bed and a small stove suggested the previous owner had also lived on the premises. They set it down where Rebecca indicated, and she immediately knelt to check the contents. The layers of padding had held, and when she carefully unwrapped one corner, the familiar blue and white pattern of her mother's favorite serving platter greeted her, intact and perfect. "It all made it," she said, relief flooding through her. She looked up at Cole, still kneeling beside the trunk, and felt something shift in her chest. "Thank you. I know I should have accepted help earlier, but I needed to know I could do it myself." "You did do it yourself. All but one piece. And that one genuinely needed two people?" Cole straightened and offered her his hand to help her up. Rebecca took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip that was tempered with gentleness. She stood, suddenly aware of how close they were in the small room, how the fading light through the window cast his face in shadow and gold. "I should let you get settled," Cole said, stepping back to a more appropriate distance. "But if you need anything else, my workshop is 3 buildings down toward the north end of town. Big sign that says Briggs Carpentry, hard to miss." "I will remember that." Rebecca walked him to the door, her exhaustion now mixed with something else, a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening temperature. "Thank you again, Cole." He touched his hat brim in that same respectful gesture and left, and Rebecca closed the door behind him. She leaned against it for a moment, listening to his footsteps fade down the street, then turned to survey her new home. Boxes and crates and bolts of fabric surrounded her, evidence of the day's labor, and beyond them the promise of the business she would build. But her mind kept returning to the moment when Cole had lifted that trunk, the way he had accepted her refusal of help all afternoon without complaint, the approval in his eyes when she finally admitted she needed assistance. Rebecca shook her head firmly, and got back to work. There were still boxes to unpack, and she needed to make the back room livable before she could sleep. Romance was not part of her plan, not now when she was just beginning to build the independent life she had dreamed of. But as she unpacked her sparse kitchen supplies and set water to boil on the small stove, she caught herself wondering if Cole had a wife, then felt foolish for wondering. By the time full darkness fell, Rebecca had managed to create a small space of order in the chaos. She had a clean corner with her bedroll spread out, her personal items arranged on a small shelf, and a pot of weak tea brewing on the stove. She had eaten the last of her travel rations and made a mental note to visit the general store first thing in the morning to stock proper supplies. Her body ached in places she had not known could ache, but it was the satisfying soreness of hard work accomplished, of goals met through determination. She was sitting on her bedroll, sipping tea and making lists in the small journal she used for business planning, when a knock on the front door startled her. Rebecca set down her tea and went to answer it, her hand automatically smoothing her hair, though she knew she must look a fright after the day's labor. A woman stood on the threshold, perhaps a few years older than Rebecca, with auburn hair pinned up in a practical style and intelligent green eyes that assessed Rebecca with frank curiosity. She held a covered basket that smelled like fresh bread and something savory that made Rebecca's mouth water. "You must be the dressmaker," the woman said without preamble. "I am Catherine Briggs, Cole's sister. He mentioned you had just arrived and probably did not have time to sort out supper, so I brought some stew and bread. Nothing fancy, but it is hot and filling." Rebecca's first instinct was to politely refuse, to maintain her independence even in this small thing, but the smell of that food and Catherine's straightforward manner made her reconsider. "That is incredibly kind of you. Please, come in. I apologize for the state of things. You should have seen this place when the cobbler had it. At least you do not have leather scraps everywhere." Catherine entered and looked around with the assessing eye of someone who knew how to evaluate a business space. "You have good light from those windows, and the back room is decent. Cole mentioned you are from Cheyenne?" "Originally from Nebraska, but I have been in Cheyenne for the past 3 years, working in a dressmaker shop there." Rebecca accepted the basket and began unpacking it, finding not just stew and bread, but also butter, a small jar of preserves, and 2 apples. "This is far too generous." "It is practical. Deadwood needs a good dressmaker, and you will not be any good to anyone if you collapse from hunger your first night here." Catherine's tone was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were warm. "Besides, Cole said you worked all afternoon unloading that wagon by yourself, and I wanted to meet the woman stubborn enough to refuse help until the very end." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I needed to prove I could manage on my own." "And you did. No one in this town will doubt your capability now, which is smart. But there is a difference between being capable and being foolish enough to injure yourself over pride." Catherine softened her words with a smile. "I own the bakery 2 streets over, and I learned that lesson the hard way. Nearly broke my back trying to move a barrel of flour by myself before I accepted that some jobs require help." They sat together in the back room, sharing the stew and bread, and Rebecca found herself relaxing in Catherine's company. The other woman had an easy way about her, confident without being overbearing, and she filled Rebecca in on the essential information about Deadwood: where to buy the best supplies, which people to trust, which saloons to avoid, and the general rhythm of life in a mining town that never quite slept. "You will get marriage proposals within a week," Catherine said bluntly as they finished their meal. "Women are scarce here, and men get foolish ideas. My advice is to be clear and firm about your intentions from the start. If you are here to build a business, say so, and do not let anyone talk you into thinking you need a husband to succeed." "You are unmarried?" Rebecca asked, curious about this woman who spoke with such authority. "Widowed. My husband died in a mining accident 2 years ago. I took his life insurance money and opened the bakery, and I have been supporting myself and Cole ever since." Catherine's expression grew sad for a moment, then cleared. "Cole was working in Denver when it happened, and he came back to help me. He is a good man, my brother, even if he can be as stubborn as a mule when he sets his mind to something." Rebecca thought about Cole's patience that afternoon, the way he had waited without pressuring her, and nodded slowly. "He seems kind. He is. Also, completely uninterested in the kind of women who populate the saloons here, and too busy building his business to go courting properly, which means I have no prospects for nieces or nephews anytime soon. Catherine stood and collected her empty dishes. I should head home. You look exhausted, and tomorrow will be busy if you're planning to set up shop. Come by the bakery in the morning, and I will have fresh bread waiting. Consider it a welcome gift before you start paying customer prices. After Catherine left, Rebecca finished her tea and prepared for bed. Her bedroll felt like luxury after weeks of sleeping in the wagon, and despite the unfamiliar sounds of Deadwood at night, the distant piano music, and occasional shouts, and the constant low hum of activity from the mines, she fell asleep almost immediately. She woke to sunlight streaming through the dusty windows and the realization that she had slept later than intended. Rebecca dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, a practical brown calico that would not show dirt, and spent an hour organizing her shop space before heading out to explore the town properly and purchase supplies. Deadwood in morning light was both rougher and more hopeful than it had seemed the night before. The main street was already busy with miners heading to and from shifts, freighters unloading supplies, and businessmen opening their establishments. Rebecca walked slowly, taking note of every shop and service, building a mental map of her new home. The general store was well stocked, the livery stable looked clean and professional, and there were far more saloons than seemed strictly necessary. But that was the nature of mining towns. She found Catherine's bakery easily, following the scent of fresh bread, and was greeted with a smile and a still warm loaf wrapped in cloth. "On the house today," Catherine said firmly when Rebecca tried to pay. "Tomorrow you start paying like everyone else, but today you are still a newcomer deserving of neighborly kindness." Rebecca shopped carefully at the general store, stretching her limited funds to cover basics while leaving enough for business expenses. The proprietor, a middle-aged man named Samuel Chen, was courteous and helpful, pointing her toward the best values and offering to extend credit if she needed it once her business was established. "A dressmaker will do well here," he said as he wrapped her purchases. "My wife has been sewing our daughter's clothes herself, but she would rather pay someone who knows what they are doing. I will send her by once you are open." By mid-afternoon, Rebecca had made significant progress in setting up her shop. She had whitewashed the worst of the walls, arranged her fabric bolts on the shelves in an attractive display, set up her sewing machine in the best light, and created a small sitting area where customers could look through pattern books and discuss their needs. She was hanging a hand-lettered sign in the window announcing that Hartfield Dressmaking would open for business in 2 days when she heard a commotion outside. 2 men were arguing in the street, their voices rising, and Rebecca could see a crowd beginning to gather. She stepped away from the window, not wanting to get involved in whatever dispute was unfolding. But then she caught sight of Cole. He was standing between the 2 arguing men, his hands raised in a placating gesture, clearly trying to diffuse the situation. "You owe me for that lumber, Davis, and I'm tired of waiting," one of the men shouted. He was large and red-faced, dressed in the rough clothes of a miner, and clearly drunk despite the early hour. "I told you I would pay when my claim comes through," the other man replied. He was smaller, gray-haired, and looked exhausted. "I have had bad luck, but it will turn around." "Bad luck is not my problem. I want my money now, or I take it out of your hide." The larger man lunged forward, and Cole caught him, holding him back with surprising strength. "Fighting will not get you paid any faster, Murphy," Cole said calmly. "Davis, you need to work out a payment plan that Murphy can accept. Murphy, you need to give the man a chance to make good on his debt. This benefits nobody." Murphy shook Cole off angrily. "Stay out of this, Briggs. This is between me and him." "You are making it everyone's business by fighting in the middle of Main Street." Cole's voice remained level, but Rebecca could see tension in his shoulders. "Take it to the sheriff if you need to, but do not do something you will regret." For a moment, Rebecca thought Murphy might throw a punch anyway, but something in Cole's steady gaze seemed to deflate his anger. He spat in the dust at Davis's feet and stalked away, still cursing. Davis slumped with relief, and Cole clapped him on the shoulder, speaking too quietly for Rebecca to hear. The crowd dispersed, disappointed by the lack of violence, and Cole stood alone in the street for a moment before continuing on his way. Rebecca returned to hanging her sign, but the incident stayed with her. There was a steadiness to Cole, a quiet authority that had diffused a volatile situation without violence or bluster. She found herself wanting to know more about him. This carpenter who helped stubborn dressmakers and broke up street fights with equal calm. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Rebecca worked from dawn until well after dark, driven by a combination of excitement and anxiety about opening her business. She received visits from several curious townswomen, including Samuel Chen's wife, who commissioned 2 dresses on the spot and paid a deposit that eased Rebecca's immediate financial concerns. Catherine stopped by with fresh bread and gossip, filling Rebecca in on the personalities and politics of Deadwood society, and Rebecca caught occasional glimpses of Cole walking past her shop, always busy with tools or lumber, always offering a polite nod when their eyes met. On her 3rd evening in Deadwood, Rebecca was measuring and cutting fabric for her first commission when someone knocked on her door. She looked up to find Cole standing outside, visible through her front window, and felt an unexpected flutter of nerves. She set down her scissors and went to let him in. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Cole said, "but I wanted to check that your floor joists were holding up under the weight of all your supplies. Sometimes old repairs settle in unexpected ways." It was such an obviously practical reason for the visit that Rebecca almost laughed, but she appreciated the thoughtfulness behind it. "Everything seems solid, but you are welcome to check." Cole entered and walked around the shop, his eyes scanning the floor with professional assessment. He knelt in a few places, testing boards with his hands, then nodded with satisfaction. "Good. It is all sound. You have arranged things well, too, with the heavier items distributed along the walls where the support is strongest." "I did not know that was ideal. I just thought it looked better." Rebecca gestured to the fabric she had been cutting. "Can I offer you coffee? I just made a fresh pot and I could use a break." They sat in her small back room, drinking coffee that was too strong because Rebecca had not yet mastered the temperament of her new stove, and talked. Cole asked about her journey from Cheyenne, and she told him about the challenges of traveling alone, the other travelers she had met, the way the landscape had shifted from plains to hills as she approached the Black Hills. She asked about his work, and he described the buildings going up around Deadwood, the challenges of working with green lumber that wanted to warp, the satisfaction of creating something solid and lasting. "I grew up watching my father build," Cole said, cradling his coffee cup in his hands. He could look at a pile of lumber and see the finished building in his mind. "I am not quite that good yet, but I am learning." "After he died, I thought about giving up carpentry, but Catherine convinced me it would be a waste of everything he taught me." "How did he die?" Rebecca asked gently. "Influenza, 5 years ago. It swept through our town in Colorado. Took him and my mother both within a week of each other." Cole's expression grew distant. "Catherine and I were both adults by then, but it still felt like the ground had disappeared beneath our feet. She married shortly after, partly for security, I think. Her husband was a good man, but when he died in that mining accident, she was back to being alone again. Except she had you. Except she had me." Cole smiled slightly. "I came back from Denver as soon as I heard, and I have been here ever since." Deadwood is rough, but there is opportunity here for people willing to work hard. The town is growing fast and everyone needs buildings. They talked until Rebecca's coffee pot was empty and the evening had deepened into night. Cole told her about the other business owners in town, which ones were honest and which required careful watching. Rebecca shared her plans for the dressmaking business, her hope to eventually hire an assistant if things went well, maybe even expand into selling ready-made items alongside custom commissions. It was easy conversation, comfortable, and Rebecca realized with some surprise that she had not felt this relaxed around a man since before her father died. When Cole finally left, offering his best wishes for her grand opening the next day, Rebecca cleaned up the coffee cups and sat for a moment in the quiet shop. She was not looking for romance, she reminded herself firmly. She had come to Deadwood to build a business and prove her independence. Getting distracted by a kind carpenter with steady hands and thoughtful eyes was not part of the plan. But as she prepared for bed that night, Rebecca found herself thinking about the way Cole smiled. The sound of his laugh when she had told him about the traveling salesman who had tried to sell her a miracle tonic that supposedly cured everything from baldness to bunions. She thought about his patience, his quiet competence, the way he had helped her without making her feel diminished. "Stop it," she told herself sternly. "You have known him for 3 days. Focus on opening your business." Her grand opening was more successful than she had dared hope. Between the women who had already commissioned work and the curious newcomers who stopped by to see what she offered, Rebecca spent the entire day measuring, discussing designs, and taking orders. By the time she closed the shop that evening, she had enough work to keep her busy for weeks and enough deposits to cover her next month's rent with some left over. Catherine arrived just as Rebecca was locking up, bringing celebratory cookies from the bakery. "I heard from at least 6 women today that you are going to revolutionize how they dress. You should feel very accomplished." "I feel exhausted and excited and terrified that I will not be able to complete everything I promised," Rebecca admitted, but she was smiling. "That is the feeling of success," Catherine said wisely. "If you were not a little terrified, you would not be taking it seriously enough. Come have supper with Cole and me tonight. You should not spend your first successful day alone, and I made a beef roast that is too large for just the 2 of us." Rebecca hesitated, torn between her instinct to maintain independence and the genuine appeal of company after a long day. "I do not want to impose." "You are not imposing. I am inviting. There is a difference." Catherine linked her arm through Rebecca's with friendly firmness. "Besides, I want to hear all about your customers today, and Cole will want to know how the floor held up under traffic." The Briggs siblings lived in a small house on the edge of town, neat and well-maintained with a front porch that overlooked the gulch. Cole answered the door, looking surprised but pleased to see Rebecca, and ushered them inside. The house was simply furnished but comfortable, with evidence of Cole's craftsmanship in the well-made furniture and Catherine's touch in the curtains and cushions that softened the rough edges. Over dinner, Rebecca found herself relaxing completely for the first time since arriving in Deadwood. Catherine and Cole had an easy rapport, teasing each other with the familiarity of siblings who genuinely liked each other, and they drew Rebecca into their circle effortlessly. She told them about her day, about the woman who wanted a dress with so many ruffles it would require 3 times the normal amount of fabric, about the miner who had shyly asked if she could make his mother a shawl for her birthday, and then produced a daguerreotype so Rebecca could match her coloring. "You have already won them over," Catherine said with satisfaction. "I knew you would. There is a confidence to you that people respond to even when you are refusing help unloading wagons." Cole laughed at that, and Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "I am trying to be less stubborn about accepting help when I genuinely need it." "Stubborn is not always bad," Cole said. "Sometimes it is the only thing that keeps you going when everything else says to quit. I would rather work with someone stubborn than someone who gives up at the first obstacle." His words settled over Rebecca like approval, and she found herself meeting his eyes across the table. There was something there, a spark of mutual understanding and attraction that made her breath catch. Catherine, watching them both with obvious interest, smiled into her coffee cup but said nothing. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Rebecca worked long hours filling orders, building her reputation, and carefully managing her finances. She took pride in every garment that left her shop, knowing that her workmanship represented not just her skill but her commitment to building something lasting. The women of Deadwood responded enthusiastically, and soon she had enough steady customers that she began looking for an assistant. Cole became a regular presence in her life, stopping by to check on various aspects of the building, to deliver furniture he thought she might need, to share coffee and conversation at the end of long days. He never pushed, never assumed, always respected the boundaries she set, and somehow that made her want to lower those boundaries more than any aggressive courtship would have. One evening in late July, after Rebecca had been in Deadwood for 6 weeks, Cole invited her to a dance being held in the town hall to celebrate someone's mining claim paying out. Rebecca's first instinct was to refuse, but Catherine had already made her a dress for the occasion, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes and fit perfectly because Catherine had taken her measurements under the guise of teaching her about local style preferences. "You cannot work all the time," Catherine said firmly when Rebecca protested. "You need to be part of the community, and that means socializing occasionally. Besides, Cole specifically asked me to make sure you knew he was hoping you would attend." So Rebecca found herself at the dance feeling self-conscious and excited in equal measure. The town hall was packed with people, the air thick with heat and the smell of sweat and perfume. A makeshift band played enthusiastic if not entirely skilled music, and couples swirled around the floor with more enthusiasm than grace. Cole found her within minutes, looking unfamiliarly formal in a clean white shirt and string tie. "You came," he said, and the relief and pleasure in his voice made Rebecca smile. "I was informed that refusing would be antisocial." She accepted his offered hand and let him lead her onto the dance floor. He was a surprisingly good dancer, confident and smooth, and Rebecca found herself relaxing into the music and movement. They danced 3 times that evening, and each time Rebecca felt more aware of him. The warmth of his hand on her waist, the way he smiled down at her, the easy conversation they maintained even while navigating the crowded floor. Other men asked her to dance as well, and she accepted politely, but she found herself counting the minutes until she could dance with Cole again. During a break in the music, they stepped outside for air, joining several other couples on the porch. The night was cool and clear, stars brilliant overhead in a way they never were in cities. Cole leaned against the railing, and Rebecca stood beside him, very aware of how close they were. "I am glad you came tonight," Cole said quietly. "I know you are focused on building your business, and I respect that, but I have been hoping for a chance to spend time with you outside of shop talk and practical concerns." Rebecca's heart beat faster. "I have enjoyed that as well. More than I expected to, honestly. When I came to Deadwood, I was not looking for anything other than professional success." "And now?" Cole turned to face her directly, his expression serious in the dim light from the windows. "Now I find myself looking forward to your visits, wondering if you will stop by, thinking about things I want to tell you when I'm working on a difficult seam." Rebecca forced herself to be honest, even though vulnerability frightened her. "But I'm also afraid of losing my focus, of letting myself depend on someone when I have worked so hard to be independent." Cole nodded slowly. "I understand that. After my parents died, I threw myself into work because it was safer than feeling too much. And after Catherine's husband died, I saw how much she struggled with having built her life around someone else. So I respect your need for independence, Rebecca. I am not asking you to give that up." "What are you asking?" "To court you properly, to see if what I think is growing between us is real." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle and questioning. "I am not interested in owning you or controlling you or expecting you to give up your business. I am interested in building something together. 2 independent people choosing to share their lives because it makes both of them happier." Rebecca looked at their joined hands, feeling the rightness of his touch, the way her fingers fit naturally between his. Every practical instinct she had told her to be cautious, to protect her hard-won independence, to focus on the business she was still building. But her heart, that traitorous, hopeful organ, was already several steps ahead, imagining a future where she did not have to choose between success and love. "I would like that," she said finally, looking up to meet his eyes. "But slowly. I need to prove to myself that I can maintain my business and my independence even while being courted." Cole's smile transformed his face, making him almost boyishly handsome. "Slowly is good. I am a carpenter. I understand building things carefully so they last." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so old-fashioned and romantic that Rebecca felt her breath catch. Then the music started again inside, and they returned to the dance, but everything had shifted. They were no longer just friendly acquaintances, but something more, something with potential and promise. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Rebecca had experienced before. Cole courted her with the same patient craftsmanship he brought to his work, building their relationship slowly and carefully. He brought her lunch when he knew she was too busy to stop working. He made her a beautiful set of shelves for her fabric, perfectly measured and sanded smooth. He invited her on walks through the hills around Deadwood, showing her places where wildflowers grew and streams ran clear, but he also respected her boundaries. When she needed to work late, he did not complain or make her feel guilty. When she was stressed about completing orders on time, he offered practical help, like running errands for her without making her feel incapable. He seemed to understand instinctively that she needed to maintain her sense of independence and competence even while being courted. Rebecca, for her part, found herself opening up in ways she had not anticipated. She told Cole about her mother's long illness, about nursing her through the final stages of consumption while trying to keep up with her own education. She told him about her father's grief afterward, how he had thrown himself into farming work until exhaustion claimed him too just 3 years later. She told him about the loneliness of those years, about the marriage proposals that felt more like business transactions than expressions of affection. Cole listened with full attention, never dismissing her experiences or trying to fix things that could not be fixed. He shared his own stories in return, about the pressure he had felt to live up to his father's reputation, about the guilt of being in Denver when Catherine needed him, about the challenges of building a business in a place as wild and unpredictable as Deadwood. Summer deepened into August, and Rebecca's business continued to thrive. She hired a young woman named Sarah as an assistant, a miner's daughter who had quick fingers and a good eye for detail. With Sarah handling some of the simpler sewing, Rebecca was able to take on more complex commissions and actually have occasional evenings free. One Sunday afternoon in late August, Cole took Rebecca on a picnic to a spot he knew in the hills above town. They rode horses. Rebecca side-saddled on the gentle mare she had purchased from the livery stable and climbed to a meadow where the view stretched for miles. Cole had packed a basket with Catherine's help, and they spread a blanket and ate cold chicken and fresh bread and early apples while watching clouds drift overhead. "I've been thinking about the future," Cole said as they lay side by side on the blanket, comfortable in the warm afternoon, "about what I want to build, not just in terms of structures, but in terms of life." Rebecca turned her head to look at him. "And what do you want to build?" "A family, a home, something lasting and real." He rolled onto his side to face her, his expression serious. "I know it is early and we have only been courting for 2 months, but I find myself thinking about a future with you in it, not just as someone I court, but as a partner, someone I come home to, someone who builds her dreams while I build mine, and we support each other in both." Rebecca's heart raced. Part of her wanted to retreat, to protect herself from the vulnerability of wanting something this much. But a larger part, the brave part that had brought her all the way to Deadwood alone, wanted to move toward this possibility rather than away from it. "I think about that too," she admitted. "More than I expected to. When I came here, I was so focused on proving I could succeed alone that I could not imagine wanting anything else. But you have shown me that being with someone does not have to mean losing myself, that I can be independent and still share my life with someone." Cole reached out and traced her jawline with gentle fingers. "I love you, Rebecca. I think I have loved you since you refused my help with that wagon, and then were brave enough to accept it when you genuinely needed it. You are the strongest, most determined person I have ever met, and I want to spend my life supporting your strength, not diminishing it." Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. "I love you too. I have been afraid to say it, afraid that admitting it would give you power over me somehow, but you have never tried to take power. You have only tried to give me more of it." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Rebecca kissed him back, letting herself feel the fullness of her emotions without fear. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I want to marry you, Summer," Cole said. "But I want to do it right. I want you to feel secure in your business first, to know that you have succeeded on your own terms before you tie your life to mine. I am not going anywhere. I can wait as long as you need." Rebecca laughed, feeling giddy with happiness and relief and love. What if I do not need long? What if I already know that this is what I want? Then we start planning a wedding. Cole sat up and pulled her with him, keeping her close. But I'm serious about wanting you to feel secure first. I do not want you to ever wonder if you would have been better off alone. They talked through the afternoon, making tentative plans, discussing how their lives would merge. Cole owned his workshop and had been saving money toward building a proper house. Rebecca's business was profitable enough that she could afford to hire another assistant if needed, which would give her more flexibility. They agreed to wait until spring to marry, giving Rebecca time to establish her business even more firmly and Cole time to build them a home. When they rode back to Deadwood as the sun was setting, Rebecca felt different. She was still herself, still independent and determined, but now she was also part of something larger, part of a partnership that promised to enhance rather than diminish her dreams. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Deadwood, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Catherine cried and hugged them both, declaring she had known from the beginning they were perfect for each other. Rebecca's customers congratulated her, and several immediately commissioned new dresses for the wedding. Even the gruff proprietor of the general store offered his best wishes and a discount on supplies for the celebration. The months between August and their planned wedding in April passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca's business continued to grow, and she hired a second assistant to keep up with demand. Cole worked on building their house, a modest but well-crafted structure on the edge of town with big windows for light and a workshop attached so he could continue his carpentry business. They spent their evenings together planning their future, discussing everything from where to place furniture to how many children they wanted. Winter came to Deadwood, bringing snow and cold and a slight slowing in business that gave Rebecca time to sew her own wedding dress. She made it from the white silk she had brought from Cheyenne, creating something beautiful and elegant that represented both her skill as a dressmaker and her joy as a bride. Catherine helped her with the delicate beadwork on the bodice, and Sarah stitched the hem with tiny, perfect stitches. Cole came by every evening that winter, often covered in sawdust despite the cold, to share supper with Rebecca and talk about their days. They were learning each other's rhythms, figuring out how to navigate disagreements and celebrate successes together. It was not always smooth, but Rebecca found that working through challenges together made their relationship stronger rather than weaker. One particularly cold evening in February, Rebecca was closing up her shop when a woman stumbled through the door. She was young, maybe 20, with a bruised face and torn clothing and eyes wild with fear. Rebecca immediately locked the door behind her and guided her to a chair. "Please, you have to help me," the woman gasped. "He is going to find me. He always finds me." "Who is?" Rebecca asked gently, already moving to light more lamps and put water on to boil. "My husband. I ran away, but he will come after me. He always does." The woman was shaking, and Rebecca could see older bruises beneath the fresh ones, a pattern of abuse that made her stomach turn. "You are safe here. What is your name?" "Emma. Emma Clark. My husband works one of the claims on the far edge of town. He drinks away everything he finds, and when there is no money left, he takes it out on me." Emma looked around the shop with desperate eyes. "I do not have anywhere to go. I do not have any money, but I cannot go back to him. He will kill me eventually." Rebecca made a decision instantly. "You can stay here tonight in my back room. Tomorrow we will figure out a more permanent solution, but right now you need to clean up and rest." She helped Emma wash her face and treated her injuries as best she could with the medical supplies she kept on hand. She gave her clean clothes and made her tea and listened as the woman's story poured out. 3 years of marriage, 2 of them filled with violence that escalated with each passing month. Emma had tried to leave twice before, but her husband had found her and dragged her back, each time punishing her more severely for the attempt. Cole arrived while Rebecca was settling Emma with blankets in the back room. He took in the situation with one look and nodded grimly. "Clark is a mean drunk. I've seen him start fights at the saloon. Do you want me to stay tonight in case he comes looking?" "Would you?" Rebecca asked, grateful for the offer. Cole settled into a chair in the front room with a blanket and his rifle, and Rebecca slept lightly, listening for any sounds of disturbance. But the night passed quietly, and in the morning, Catherine arrived with breakfast and immediately took Emma under her wing. "You will stay with me," Catherine declared. "I have an extra room, and I could use help in the bakery if you're willing to work for room and board while you get on your feet." Emma started crying, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. Over the next few days, Rebecca, Cole, and Catherine worked to establish Emma's independence. Cole and several other men paid a visit to Clark, making it clear that Emma was under community protection, and any attempt to reclaim her would result in serious consequences. Catherine taught Emma to bake and gave her a job with fair wages. Rebecca made her new clothes that fit properly and helped her regain some of her confidence. It was not a perfect solution. Clark left town a month later, either intimidated by the community response or simply moving on to more profitable claims elsewhere. Emma slowly healed, both physically and emotionally, and became a valued member of Deadwood society. The experience reinforced for Rebecca what she already knew: that community mattered, that independence did not mean refusing all help, and that using her own strength to help others was as important as establishing her business success. Spring arrived gradually, snow melting to reveal the first green shoots and the air losing its bitter edge. Cole finished their house in March, and Rebecca walked through it with wonder, seeing how he had built it with her needs in mind. A large bright room on the ground floor for her dressmaking business, with space for her assistants to work. A comfortable kitchen with a good stove. A bedroom upstairs that caught the morning light. And everywhere, the evidence of Cole's craftsmanship and care. "It is perfect," Rebecca said, standing in the middle of their future home with tears in her eyes. "You built this for us." "I built it for our life together," Cole corrected, pulling her close. "A place where you can work, and I can work, and we can be together. Not one life overshadowing the other, but both lives existing side by side." Their wedding took place on a bright April morning, 1 year almost to the day from when Rebecca had first arrived in Deadwood. The ceremony was held in the town hall, which the community had decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Nearly everyone in Deadwood attended, having grown fond of both Rebecca and Cole over the months. Catherine stood as Rebecca's attendant, and Cole's best friend from his carpentry crew stood for him. Rebecca wore her silk dress and carried wildflowers, and when she walked down the makeshift aisle to where Cole waited, she felt no hesitation or doubt. This was right. This was what she wanted. Not instead of her independence, but in addition to it. The vows they spoke were traditional, but felt deeply personal. To love and honor, to support each other through challenges, to build a life together based on mutual respect and partnership. When Cole kissed her as his wife, the entire room erupted in cheers, and Rebecca laughed against his lips, feeling happier than she had ever imagined possible. The celebration afterward was raucous and joyful, with food and dancing and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilariously inappropriate. Rebecca danced with Cole, with Catherine, with Samuel Chen and the other business owners who had become her friends. She accepted congratulations from her customers and well wishes from people she barely knew. And through it all, she felt anchored by Cole's presence, by the choice they had made together. They spent their wedding night in their new house, and Rebecca felt the rightness of it, of being in this space they would share, of beginning their married life in a place built specifically for their partnership. Cole was gentle and patient, and Rebecca let herself be vulnerable with him in ways she had never been with anyone else. They lay together afterward, talking quietly about the future, about the life they would build together. "Do you have any regrets?" Cole asked, tracing patterns on her shoulder. "About giving up your independence?" "I have not given it up," Rebecca said firmly. "I have chosen to share it with someone who respects it. That is completely different. My business is still mine. My goals are still mine. My identity is still mine. But now I also have a partner who makes everything better, including the independence I value so much." Cole kissed her forehead. "You are remarkable, Rebecca Briggs. I am the luckiest man in Deadwood." We are both lucky, Marie, Rebecca corrected. We found each other, and we were both brave enough to take the risk of loving each other. Their married life settled into a comfortable pattern that evolved naturally. Rebecca continued to run her dressmaking business, now with 3 assistants and a reputation that extended beyond Deadwood to other towns in the Black Hills. Cole's carpentry business thrived as well, and he became known as one of the most reliable builders in the region. They supported each other's work, celebrating successes and helping through challenges, but they also maintained their individual identities and goals. In the evenings, they would sit together in their kitchen, Rebecca often sewing while Cole sketched building plans, comfortable in each other's company without needing to fill every moment with conversation. They hosted dinners for Catherine and their growing circle of friends. They took walks in the hills and talked about everything and nothing. They learned each other's moods and preferences and the thousands of small details that make up a shared life. Their first child arrived in February of 1878, a son they named Thomas after Cole's father. Rebecca had worried about how motherhood would affect her business, but with Cole's support and her assistant's help, she was able to continue working while also caring for their son. Cole proved to be a devoted father, comfortable with the practical aspects of childcare, and happy to spend evenings rocking Thomas while Rebecca finished projects. "You're good at this," Rebecca said one evening, watching Cole soothe their fussing son with gentle competence. "I like it. Being a father, having this little person who depends on us." Cole looked down at Thomas with wonder. "I want to be the kind of father mine was, present and involved, not just a distant authority figure." Thomas was followed by a daughter 2 years later, Catherine, named after Catherine, who cried when they told her, and then another son, Samuel, and finally another daughter, Mary. Their house was full of noise and activity and love, and somehow Rebecca managed to balance it all. Her business, her children, her marriage, her friendships. It was not always easy. There were days when she felt pulled in too many directions, when the demands of motherhood clashed with the requirements of running a business, but Cole was always there to share the load, to remind her that she did not have to be perfect at everything simultaneously. Catherine remained a constant presence in their lives, an adored aunt to their children, and a business partner to Rebecca when they decided to expand the dressmaking business to include a small section of Catherine's bakery. Emma, who had healed and thrived in Deadwood, eventually married a gentle miner named Patrick and had children of her own. The friendships Rebecca had built in those early days remained strong, a network of women supporting each other through the challenges of life in a rough mining town. As Deadwood matured from a wild mining camp into a more established town, Rebecca and Cole matured with it. They watched their children grow, guiding them toward independence while providing the love and security Rebecca had sometimes lacked in her own childhood. Thomas showed an aptitude for carpentry and began working with Cole. Catherine inherited Rebecca's skill with a needle and her determination. Samuel was quieter, drawn to books and learning. Mary was fearless and adventurous, constantly exploring and asking questions. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Rebecca back to the meadow where they had picnicked, where he had first told her he loved her. Their children were spending the day with Catherine, and they had stolen away for a few hours alone. They spread a blanket in the same spot and lay looking up at the sky, older now but still deeply in love. "Do you remember what I asked you here 10 years ago?" Cole said, taking her hand. "You asked what I wanted to build, and you told me you wanted to build a family and a home." Rebecca squeezed his fingers. "You have succeeded beyond anything I could have imagined that day. We succeeded together." Cole turned to face her. "I look at our life, at our children, at the businesses we have built and the community we have helped create, and I am in awe of what we have accomplished. But do you know what I'm most proud of?" "What?" "That you are still you. That stubborn, determined woman who refused help unloading her wagon. You have not disappeared into being just my wife or just a mother. You are still Rebecca, still building your dreams, still insisting on doing things your own way." He smiled at her with the same warmth he had shown that first evening when she finally accepted his help. I am proud that I have been part of your journey without overshadowing it." Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks, happy ones this time. "You have given me the greatest gift anyone could give. You have loved me without trying to change me. You have supported my independence while also giving me partnership. You have shown me that I do not have to choose between strength and love, between success and family." They kissed there in the meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and the smell of pine, and Rebecca felt the same flutter of excitement and contentment she had felt when Cole first kissed her all those years ago. The foundation they had built was strong, and the life they had created together was richer than anything she could have built alone. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also deep satisfactions. Thomas married a teacher from one of the neighboring towns and took over Cole's carpentry business when Cole decided to slow down. Catherine opened her own dressmaking shop in another town, taking everything Rebecca had taught her and adding her own innovations. Samuel went east to university, something that made both Rebecca and Cole burst with pride, and eventually became a lawyer. Mary married a rancher and moved to Montana, writing long letters home about her adventures. Rebecca's hair turned gray, and Cole's moved from brown to silver to white. They watched Deadwood change around them, becoming more civilized, more established, losing some of its rough edges but gaining stability. The wild days of the mining boom faded into history, and they became part of the town's established community. The couple who had built successful businesses and raised good children and supported their neighbors through decades of change. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration. The entire family gathered, including grandchildren now, a boisterous group that filled their house with noise and laughter. Catherine was there too, older but still sharp and energetic, regaling the grandchildren with stories about their parents' courtship. Emma and Patrick came with their family. The general store owner and his wife, now retired but still active in community affairs. So many people whose lives had intersected with Rebecca and Cole's over the years. After the party, when everyone had gone home and they were cleaning up together, Rebecca paused to look around their house. The same house Cole had built for them, now worn and comfortable with use, filled with memories and evidence of their shared life. "Thank you," she said suddenly, and Cole looked up from stacking plates. "For what?" "For seeing me that first day. For respecting my refusal of help. For offering it anyway when I needed it. For building this life with me." Rebecca crossed to him and took his hands, these hands that had built so much, that had held her and their children, that had worked alongside her for 25 years. "For loving me exactly as I am." Cole pulled her close, and they stood together in their kitchen, no longer young but still deeply connected. "It has been my privilege. Every day with you has been a gift, Rebecca. Every stubborn, determined, wonderful day." They finished cleaning up together, moving in the synchronized way of people who have worked side by side for decades, and then sat on their porch watching the stars come out over Deadwood. The town was quiet now, settled for the night, and in the distance they could hear the faint sound of a piano from one of the remaining saloons. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked. "Choosing me instead of someone easier, someone who would have been content to just be your wife and let you lead?" "Never. Not once. Not for a single moment." Cole's answer was immediate and certain. "You challenged me to be better, to think more deeply, to build not just structures, but a partnership. You made me the man I wanted to be. How could I ever regret that?" Rebecca leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had been her anchor through all the changes and challenges of their life together. She thought about that first day in Deadwood, how she had been so determined to prove her independence, so focused on doing everything alone. She had not known then that accepting help would not diminish her, but would open the door to something richer and more fulfilling than she had imagined. The years after their 25th anniversary brought more changes. Catherine died peacefully in her sleep at 73, and they mourned her deeply, but they also celebrated the full life she had lived and the impact she had made on their family. Rebecca eventually retired from active dressmaking, turning her business over to one of her longtime assistants, but still consulting on complex projects. Cole had already transitioned his business to Thomas years earlier, but he still built things in his workshop, furniture for grandchildren and birdhouses and small decorative items that he gave away. They became the oldest generation in their family, the keepers of stories and traditions, the ones their children and grandchildren came to for advice and comfort. Rebecca loved this role, loved watching her descendants build their own lives and make their own choices. She saw pieces of herself and Cole in each of them, but she also saw their unique personalities and paths, and she was proud of the independence and strength they showed. On a warm summer evening in 1901, Rebecca and Cole sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age, but still healthy and engaged with life. Their children had organized a family reunion for the next day, and relatives were arriving from across the West. 50 years, Rebecca said softly. We have been married for 50 years. 50 years since you finally accepted my help with that trunk, Cole said with a hint of the smile she had loved for half a century. Best decision you ever made. Rebecca laughed, the sound raspy now, but still full of genuine amusement. I think it was the best decision we both made, choosing to build something together. Tell me again about that first day, Cole said, about what you were thinking when you refused my help. Rebecca settled back in her chair, remembering. I was thinking that I had to prove I could do everything alone, or I would never be taken seriously. I was thinking that accepting help meant admitting weakness. I was so young and so determined and so afraid of failing. You were magnificent, stubborn as a mule, but magnificent. Cole reached for her hand, and she gave it to him, their fingers intertwining automatically. I knew that day I wanted to know you better, that you were someone special. And when you offered to help with the trunk, I was so angry at myself for needing it, but also relieved. Rebecca looked at their joined hands, still strong despite the age spots and wrinkles. I learned that day that accepting help when you truly need it does not make you weak. It makes you wise, and sometimes it opens the door to something wonderful. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over Deadwood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town had changed so much from the rough mining camp it had been when Rebecca first arrived. Paved streets now, electric lights in some buildings, telephones connecting people across distances, but some things remained constant, the mountains rising around them, the sense of community, the value of hard work and mutual support. No regrets? Cole asked, as he had asked so many times over their years together. None at all, Rebecca answered as she always did. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. Partnership without possession, support without diminishment, love that enhanced my strength rather than replacing it. Their children and grandchildren arrived over the next day, filling the house and yard with noise and energy and love. The golden anniversary celebration was everything Rebecca had hoped for. Toasts and stories and laughter. Her grandchildren wide-eyed as their parents told tales of the early days of Deadwood. Cole telling the story of how they met, embellishing slightly for dramatic effect but keeping the essential truth intact. Rebecca showing her granddaughters her wedding dress, still carefully preserved, and talking about the importance of building lives on their own terms. As the celebration wound down and evening approached, Rebecca stood in her yard surrounded by her descendants and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love, all of it had started with a moment of vulnerability, with accepting help when she needed it, with being brave enough to open herself to the possibility of partnership. Cole found her there and slipped his arm around her waist. Thinking deep thoughts? Thinking about how grateful I am for you, for our children, for the life we built together. She leaned into him, still finding comfort in his presence after all these years. Thinking about how that stubborn girl who refused help unloading her wagon had no idea how much her life was about to change. That stubborn girl became a remarkable woman, Cole said softly. A successful businesswoman, a wonderful mother, an amazing wife. She changed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone she touched. Their eldest grandchild, Thomas's daughter Anne, approached them shyly. She was 16, on the cusp of adulthood, and Rebecca saw in her the same determination she had possessed at that age. Grandmother, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. How did you know that grandfather was the right person to marry? How did you know you would not lose yourself by getting married? Anne's questions were earnest, revealing the worries of a young woman beginning to think about her own future. Rebecca considered carefully before answering. I did not know for certain. There is no absolute certainty in matters of the heart. But I knew that your grandfather respected my independence. He never tried to diminish my dreams or convince me that his plans were more important than mine. He saw my refusal of help as strength, not as something to break down. And when I finally did accept his help, he did not treat it as surrender, but as trust. But were you not afraid of losing who you were? Terrified, Rebecca admitted. I had worked so hard to build my independence, to prove I could succeed on my own. The idea of trusting someone else with my heart felt like giving up control. But your grandfather taught me that the right partnership does not diminish you. It enhances you. It gives you someone to celebrate with when times are good and someone to lean on when times are hard without taking away your essential self. Anne thought about this, then smiled. I want to find someone like that someday. Someone who sees my strength and loves me for it. You will, Rebecca said with confidence, because you know what to look for now. Someone who respects your independence, someone who supports your dreams, someone who offers help when you need it, but does not insist on rescuing you when you do not. After Anne returned to the party, Cole squeezed Rebecca's hand. You are still teaching, even now. I hope so. I hope our grandchildren learn from our example that you can be both independent and loved, strong and partnered, successful and married. Those things are not contradictory unless you choose the wrong person. The years that followed their golden anniversary were peaceful and fulfilling. Rebecca and Cole slowed down further, letting their children take over more of the practical aspects of daily life, but they remained engaged and present. They read together, took gentle walks, welcomed visiting family, and sat on their porch sharing memories and comfortable silence. Cole's heart began to fail when he was 76, and the doctor warned them he likely had only a few years left. Rebecca felt fear grip her at the thought of losing him, but she also felt grateful for every moment they had shared. They talked openly about death, about what would come after, about how Rebecca would manage without him. You will be fine, Cole said one evening as they sat together. His breathing labored, but his mind still sharp. You have always been fine. You were independent and strong before you met me, and you will be independent and strong after I am gone. But I will miss you, Rebecca said, allowing herself to cry. Every single day for the rest of my life, I will miss you. And I will have loved you every single day of my life. That is not a bad legacy. Cole reached for her hand with effort. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will not stop living just because I am gone. Keep working if it brings you joy. Keep engaging with the community. Keep being Rebecca, not just my widow. He looked at her intently. You taught me that marriage is partnership, not possession. That means I do not own you even in death. You are still yours, always. Rebecca kissed him through her tears. I promise. But you have to promise me something too. What is that? Promise me you know how much you changed my life, how much better everything was because you were in it, how grateful I am for every stubborn moment, every compromise, every joy and challenge we shared. I know, Cole said softly, I've always known. You showed me every day through your actions, through the life we built together, through the way you loved me without losing yourself. Cole died on a cold January morning in 1904, surrounded by his family holding Rebecca's hand. She felt the moment he left, felt the absence of his presence like a physical wound, and grieved deeply. But she also felt gratitude for the 53 years they had shared, for the partnership they had built, for the love that had enhanced rather than diminished her. True to her promise, Rebecca did not stop living. She continued to consult on complex dressmaking projects. She remained active in community affairs. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom. She took up painting, something she had always wanted to try but never had time for. She lived fully and independently, mourning Cole's absence but not allowing it to define her entirely. On what would have been their 55th wedding anniversary, Rebecca made a pilgrimage to the meadow where Cole had first told her he loved her. Her grandson, Thomas Jr., drove her there in his automobile, a modern convenience that still amazed her, and helped her walk to the spot where they had picnicked so many times over the years. She sat on a blanket, surrounded by wildflowers, and talked to Cole as if he were there beside her. She told him about the grandchildren's accomplishments, about the changes in Deadwood, about her painting and her continued work. She told him how much she missed him, but also how grateful she was for the life they had shared. "You gave me the perfect gift," she said to the wind and the sky and the memory of the man she had loved. "You loved me without trying to own me. You supported me without diminishing me. You showed me that independence and partnership could coexist, that I could be strong and still be loved." Rebecca lived for another 8 years after Cole's death, dying peacefully in her sleep at 84. In those years, she watched her great-grandchildren begin to grow, saw the continued evolution of Deadwood from rough mining town to established community, and maintained her sense of self and purpose until the very end. When she died, her children found a letter she had written to be read at her funeral. In it, she told the story of arriving in Deadwood that June day in 1876, of refusing help unloading her wagon, of finally accepting assistance with that last heavy trunk. She wrote about Cole's patience, his respect, his love. She wrote about building a life that honored both independence and partnership. And she ended with advice for her descendants. "Be brave enough to do things alone when you need to prove your strength," she wrote. "But be wise enough to accept help when you truly need it. Build your own dreams, but do not be afraid to let others support you in building them. Independence is precious, but so is love. The right person will enhance your strength, not diminish it. Wait for that person. And when you find them, be brave enough to build something beautiful together." At her funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives Rebecca had touched over her decades in Deadwood. Her children spoke about her strength and determination. Her grandchildren talked about her wisdom and love. And her great-granddaughter Anne, now a successful lawyer herself, read from Rebecca's letter and spoke about what it meant to see that kind of partnership modeled throughout her life. Rebecca was buried next to Cole, their headstones simple but elegant, bearing their names and the dates that bracketed lives well lived. And in the years that followed, their story became part of Deadwood's history, passed down through generations as an example of what true partnership looked like. The house Cole built still stood decades later, eventually becoming a historical landmark. The dressmaking shop Rebecca had opened on Main Street went through several owners but kept her name, Hartfield Dressmaking, becoming synonymous with quality and integrity. And their descendants, scattered across the West and beyond, carried forward the lessons Rebecca and Cole had taught through their example. That independence and love could coexist. That accepting help did not mean surrendering strength. That the right partnership enhanced rather than diminished. That sometimes refusing help proved your capability, but accepting it when you truly needed it proved your wisdom. And that from such moments, from vulnerability and trust and mutual respect, the most beautiful lives could be built. Rebecca Hartfield Briggs, the stubborn woman who refused help unloading her wagon, had built an extraordinary life, not just alone and not just with someone, but in partnership with someone who loved her exactly as she was and supported her in becoming even more than she had imagined possible. And that life, that love, that partnership rippled forward through time, touching lives and changing futures in ways neither she nor Cole could have fully anticipated when they first met on that dusty street in Deadwood so many years before.